Welcome to the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad. My name is Chris Finn. I'm your host, and today I'm excited to have another Chris with me. And for those of you who maybe haven't discovered this really cool platform called YouTube, maybe you don't know who he is, but he is an amazing instructor. It's an honor to have him on here with us. I want to welcome Chris Ryan to the show. Chris, how are you doing, man? I
am really, really good. Thanks, Chris. Good to be here. Thank you for having me on and to talk about golf.
Yeah, man. No, it's always this is, we were talking a little bit before we jumped on it. This is always for me, selfishly, I'm a nut. I love the game of golf. I've obviously gotten in on the physical side of things. And so get to talk to great instructors like yourself and the experience you've had, the Ryder Cup I saw, like you were involved back in 2002, the amount of teaching you've done at some of the facilities you've done it at is incredible. So selfishly for me, I've been looking forward to this all week. So, but for the listener who doesn't know who you are, I always love to hear kind of the backstory and share that with the listeners. Cause, as an entrepreneur myself and having built something from the ground up, I love hearing about that and the listeners love that too. So please, how'd you get into this and how did we end up here today on a beautiful morning?
Oh, well, it depends, I guess, how far you want to go back, really. In terms of my kind of introduction to, I guess, the world of kind of working in golf, I was quite fortunate, which I guess, if you find a lot of people in the industry, there's always going to be that point where they got a little bit of luck. I was trying to become a better golfer, trying to become the best golfer that I could be. And I was having lessons with the head pro at the time at the Belfry. Now, back then, the Belfry was, pretty famous. It had hosted a lot of Ryder Cups. It had a lot of European Tour events. It was a kind of real kind of hub for golf in Europe. And I was kind of going there for my lessons. And I was probably, how old was I? 17, 18 at the time. And the guy who was giving me my lessons kind of said to me one day, he said, look, we're having a big sort of change in the way we do things at the Belfry. And we are looking to take on 12 amateur golfers who we're looking to put through their PJ training, but we're looking to do it a little differently. We're looking to give them this kind of overall experience of what it's like to work at a golf venue. So you would work in the golf shop and learn how the golf shop works. You would then work on the academy, look at how the academy works. You'd look at how to run a golf course. You'd all these different aspects. And he said, look, I've coached you for a couple of years. I'd love you to apply. So that was really when I was kind of playing the game, trying to become a great player. And then suddenly I had this opportunity to actually kind of go in and work in the industry. And the Belfry were kind of paying half of my PJ fees.
What a cool opportunity.
It was a no-brainer. I was actually at university at the time and I quit uni.
Did you really?
Good for you. Quit my university course and then went to work at the Belfry and started there as an amateur golfer. And then kind of that's led to where I am today.
The rest is history. Wow, that's so cool. So how have you seen, how have you seen that type of program evolve? Obviously you were kind of sounds like the guinea pigs, right? And then how did that evolve, maybe even just in the time you were there to, what we see today?
I mean, that was 2001, so a number of years ago now. And to this day, that experience, that going through my PGA, which, took 3 years, I still look back at that experience and take so much from that because, like I said, I think there was like 12 of us that they took on, all amateur golfers, and put through their PJ training. And the way that was run at the Belfry, the guy who was overseeing it was a guy called Simon, and he was phenomenal. Like the way he structured it, the way that we got an experience of, like I said, how the shop works, how you purchase stock and how you price stock, and then how to run a golf course and how to organize a golf day and all these kind of different aspects. And at the end of that 3 years, when we qualified from our PGA training, I think of those 12 people, I think there was like 6 or 7 who qualified in the top 10 of Europe.
Wow.
And a lot of those people are in the industry now doing great things. So you've got people that people might know of, like Chris Trott, who works over in the States. There's a couple of other guys doing really well. It really opened my eyes to how, if you put the right structure in place, we all flourished under that system.
Yeah.
And as we left, Simon also left the Belfry to go and
Right.
pursue other things. And yeah, things maybe changed a little bit now, but it kind of showed me that, putting yourself with good people,
Yeah.
having a structure, there was just such an incredible experience.
That's amazing. And I think speaking of structure, I want to dive into, we are a fitness podcast. So I always love to understand from an instructor side of things. And obviously, if anybody has not seen your YouTube channel, I would strongly encourage all of you guys to go see it. Chris Ryan Golf YouTube. The amount of instruction, I always like to do research before I get on a pod with somebody, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of got distracted for a couple hours, different videos, and it was so good. And I think the interesting thing for me on the physical side is I always want to understand, when you have a golfer come to you, right? How do you approach that first time you meet somebody and looking at assessing what you're gonna work on with them and what they need, and how does that, their body and what it does or doesn't do, how does that potentially influence kind of how you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting topic and debate. And I would say, in my experience, that's changed over the years of coaching. And that probably comes down to a little bit of me evolving as a coach, and also maybe just the clients that I work with has potentially changed a little bit. Certainly, I remember, I qualified from the PGA, and in the PGA you do a little bit of the kind of physical side of things. You learn the basics, the real basics. And I remember kind of coming out of the PGA thinking, right, how am I going to make golfers better? Well, I've got to get them to move better. I've got to kind of learn how to screen them so I can see what their limitations are. I've got to be able to put them in touch with someone who can maybe work on those physical limitations, that accompanied with the swing stuff that I'm doing, and you create this kind of team around the golfer.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at the elite level, the tour players, that's 100% the case.
Works very well at that level.
Works very well. I was kind of tending to see more of Dave, who's got a job, he's got a family, he plays Saturday mornings, he slices it, and he would love to just stop slicing it.
And you mean he doesn't have 40 hours a week to do everything else to be better at golf? What?
No, not so much. And at the Belfry we did a lot of corporate days. So I would be working with clients who have got a tee time in an hour's time. And it sort of got me to the point where I'm saying, okay, I probably need to tailor my coaching to actually, yes, have that knowledge that if somebody comes to me and says, can you test where I'm maybe got some limitations, I can do that, but also develop a coaching style that allows me to speak to someone who's got a tee time in an hour and say, right, I'd like you to do this. We need a little workaround for that. And I think I'm sort of more in the case now I tend to work with people who are kind of coming to me to say, look, I just want to hit it better when I play on Saturday. And it's nice for me to have a little bit of background knowledge to say, look, if you do want to take it further, then this is probably what you need to do. And I think I've just seen that in my coaching. It's just the clients that I coach tend to be.
Well, I see that. I think that's refreshing for a lot of people to hear, because I think, particularly in my space, everybody, we need to change this. You need to commit, and you need to do. And the reality is, most golfers don't want to do that. They don't have time. They don't have the interest. Like, to your point, like, dude, I get to play once, maybe twice on a really good week. Like, just help me enjoy the game. And so for you as a coach, having the background on the physical side, if that guy comes to you and he's slicing it and he tees off in an hour, how do you approach that, that guy? If you have an hour to hopefully help him get out and enjoy the round a little bit better, like, what does that process look for you as you're looking at that player? And I, having talked to enough good coaches, you probably just see it and you're like, boom, I know what it is. But if you had to break it down for all of us dumber amateurs who don't understand it at the level that you do, how would you kind of talk through that or explain that at kind of a second grade level for all the rest of us?
I think I've spoken to a lot of coaches over the years and worked with a lot of coaches, and I think the way a coach looks at a golfer is possibly the complete opposite to the way that golfers look at themselves.
Right.
If I could just get golfers to look at it in a different order, I think they'd be a little bit better.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that would be, if I see a client and they say, hey, look, I'm struggling with a driver, I'm playing an hour, what do I need to do? The first thing I'm looking at is, what is the ball doing?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to stand there and I'm going to watch them hit some shots. I'm going to say, right, the ball is starting, let's say, pretty straight.
Mm-hmm.
It's drifting a little bit off to the right.
Yeah.
I'll watch them hit a few shots and I'll establish what their pattern is.
Okay.
And every golfer's got a pattern. Most golfers say, oh, I'm too inconsistent, but everyone's got a pattern.
Yeah.
So once I can see that pattern, I'm then going, okay, what's happening at impact that's creating that ball flight? So what is the likely contact point? What is the likely path? What is the likely face alignment? What is the likely attack angle? What is the likely speed that's giving me all that information? Now, where possible, I'm going to measure that with my full swing kit, but essentially I'm looking at, what is the ball doing? What is the club doing? Once I know what the club is doing, I then look at the golf swing and say, okay, well, what is in their golf swing which is creating that impact that we don't necessarily like? Then my question to myself is, what's the kind of quote unquote smallest thing that I can do that's going to have the biggest effect on that impact?
Minimal effective dose. I love it. Yeah.
Correct. So I'm always going ball flight first, impact second, swing third. Golfers come to me with swing first.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I want to fix my inside takeaway. And I'm like, right, why? Like, what's, but it's all about, they look at it on camera, they don't see what they like, and they kind of go straight to that. Whereas I'd want people to go the other way. And the number of times I've given lessons and I've said things like, look, yes, your takeaway is on the outside or it's on the inside, but changing that will not change what the ball is doing.
Right.
And I'd always say, look, we've got a list of things that you might want to change. That inside takeaway is quite possibly on that list, but it's not at the top.
Right.
And it's trying to prioritize, okay, if we actually change this, that's going to change the impact, that's going to change the ball flight. And I think as a coach, you're always trying to say, if I do this to the swing, what will that do to the impact? And what will that do to the ball flight? And there has to be that kind of, always those three touch points that you're kind of aware of.
I love that logic tree. That's so simple to understand, but definitely not what the average amateur thinks about.
No. And then just going to what you were saying earlier, that might be when I would always say to a client, look, and one of the things that I do differently now is I'm led by the client. So I think that's the big difference. When I came out as a new coach, he was like, right, I'm going to change the world and I want to do it this way and this way and this way and this way. And almost trying to force my opinions on the golfer. Yeah. I'm very much more down to like listening to them now. Yeah. So once I've maybe analyzed their ball flight impact and swing, that's when I might say to them, hey, look, if you do this today, that's going to help. But then I might say, but I think you've got maybe a few limitations in your trail shoulder. Might do a little test for them and say, right, you have got some limitations. So if you do this, it will help it. But if you really want to get better, you might want to address that. And just give them the information. And it's up to them then what they kind of do with it.
Yeah, that's so. So let's just to put this in context for everybody listening. And let's say theoretically there is a late 30s golfer who, and by no means anybody on this podcast, and when they're hitting it well, it starts out right target line, comes back down, to target. So what I'm hearing is, if my miss, not me, just the theoretical me, right, is it'll start left and go a little left. Then what you're saying is the way you're going to look at that is say, okay, that's what the ball's doing. Then I'm going to look at impact and see what could be potentially influencing that. And then I'm going to look at swing and see what in the swing would be potentially causing that. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So based on that, if I was going to say you're there, it's not your, is it? Nobody might be you.
This is just a theoretical thing I thought of. Yeah, Chris.
If the good shot starts right and turns back, and the bad shot starts a little closer to target and finishes left, you're probably looking at that and saying, well, that's club face at impact. Mm-hmm. So then you'd say, okay, so how do we kind of eliminate the left miss? We'd need to deliver a club face which is potentially trending to a little bit more open.
Right.
So then you'd say, okay, already without even seeing your goal swing, I could potentially list 4 or 5 things that could influence the club face to be more right.
Right.
So even without looking at a goal swing, you could say, well, if you push the ball a little bit further back in your stance, you're hitting it slightly earlier in the arc. Yeah. That might help. Mm-hmm. You could try and shift laterally a little bit more towards the target. Yeah. So, what I always say to clients is that whatever you do in your golf swing, whether it be a little grip change, whether it be a setup change, whatever you do is likely to influence the impact.
Mm-hmm.
And there's theory there. We never know until the golfer does it. But if you kind of said to me, I'm going to push the ball a little bit further back, already I'm thinking path is likely to be more right, face is likely to be more open, attack angle is likely to be more down. These are all likelies because the golfer is complex and they can react differently. But you can already start to think about what you could put in place to change that ball flight before you even look to the golf swing.
That's so cool. This is why I love these conversations, because this is why I love working with guys like yourself, because we have somebody maybe comes in because maybe their back hurts, right? So they come in, they come into us when they can't swing anymore. That's when people are real motivated to see us.
Yeah.
Right. So they'll come in and they'll say, inevitably we start talking about the golf swing, or, they tell us, about their game, or, depending how bad it is, we may actually hook them up on the force plates and the 3D and just see what their body's doing, and what maybe is, we're looking at it obviously as what potentially is contributing to the back overworking and causing the back issues. Right. And so that's where we look at it, and we'll find, hey, their trail shoulder doesn't externally rotate. They have no lead hip rotation into their lead side. So, and they're coming real steep and going hard left, all upper body. And then, so it's always fun for us to say, have the conversations. I literally was just having this conversation with a guy down at the Open, one of the coaches, saying, hey, physically, these are all the things that could be influencing. Here's 4 things we could address. What are you looking at performance-wise that you want to address? Because I don't want to address something that screws up something over here. And to me, that those are like the most fun conversations, when you have a player who wants to work at it and who wants to kind of improve, what they're doing. And so I guess I always love to kind of lead into my next question for you then is, we've kind of talked about that guy who's got the tee time in the hour, right? When you do have a player maybe who's coming back to you wanting to get better and progress, and maybe it's even something you did as you were, continuing trying to play well, how do you recommend tracking progress over time, or how do you go about that with students to know that they're improving? And, you said, hey, I'm going to have 4 or 5 different things. We could address that inside swing, but maybe I'm going to address 3 things first. How do you kind of organize that in your mind and track it and know when to do what?
Great question. It comes down to ultimately what is going to make the golfer better, and hitting it better, swinging it better will be part of that. But I think it comes down to a little bit more of saying, what is going to give this golfer the tools that they need to shoot lower score. So for lots of golfers, it will be a case of hitting it further. If their driver's maxing out at 180, 190 yards, you have to have that conversation and say, look, a lot of the courses that you play, you probably need a little bit more distance. It might be just looking at their, right miss with the driver and saying we need to bring that a little bit more to the center. So one thing I would ask golfers is, I always push the word how.
Yeah.
And golfers get unstuck on that. And I think you've got to be clear on that. So they'll say to me, I want to lower my handicap. I go, how? And they often don't have an answer.
They just look at you with a blank stare.
Yeah. But I want them initially to have the answer. So if I imagine a conversation that I have with an 18 handicap golfer, how easy is my job if they come to me and say, I'm off 18, I want to be off 15, and I go, how? And they go, well, currently I'm hitting 15% of fairways. I'd love that to be close to 50. Okay. Yeah. How? Well, currently I'm missing it off to the right. My tendencies are fades. I want to work it more to a draw. You're starting to get, then I can go, okay, well, I can now work on the things that are going to give you the results. When it's just I want to be better, where do you start? So I think part of our job as the coach is to try and, pull back the curtains to find out actually what does this golfer want? Yes, they want to get better, but what does that look like? It's no good someone coming to me and saying, I want to be off 18. I'm currently off 24. Can you have a look at my driver? If they're taking 45 putts around,
that's a fair point. Yeah.
It has to start with some basic stats. Now, you start talking stats to your average golfer and they get a bit like, I don't need to do that. Right. Just basic stats. just something we can look at and say, right, I appreciate that this golfer's not got 5 days a week to practice.
Yeah.
So when they have got an hour, we need to make sure that we're doing in that hour the things that will actually benefit them. So we have to have some goals, whether it's, we want to increase our driver distance by 20 yards. We want to take our driver dispersion and bring it a little bit closer to the center. We want to work on our ball striking because it's inconsistent. Once you've got those goals, then you can start to work towards improving those. Then things like, my full swing kit that I've got helps me sort of measure those, and we can start to track progress. And that's really powerful, because if you can say to a golfer, I'd like you to do this, 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 I think you will see a change in the numbers and a change in the ball flight. And if they make those changes and see those results, it's kind of a real confidence boost for them to say, okay, I'm on the right track here. And I think the other thing I would say in terms of progress is just getting a golfer to appreciate what that journey might look like. And sort of appreciate there's some steps in there. So, for example, they might leave a lesson and hit it a lot better, and then come back 2 weeks later and go, do you know what, it was awful on the course, and I hit it great in the lesson.
Yeah.
And I'll say, well, did you do any drills that would transfer your new skills to the course?
Yeah.
And they look at you a bit like, nope, I just kind of hit it better on the range and expected it to happen on the course.
It doesn't just stay in my golf bag and come back out when I open it next.
Exactly. So it's all about just having these conversations to say, look, when you can hit it better on the range and your swing is where it wants to be and the ball flight's behaving like you want it to do, that's not your goal swing fixed. You've now got to do some transference drills. You've got to make your practice more like the course. You've got to build pressure. You've got to space your shots out. You've got to change your target. You've got to adjust the lie. You've got to do all these kind of exercises. So I think tracking progress, if the golfer is just saying, I'm here, I want to lower my scores, that's tough. I think you've got to put things in place to say, okay, well, our first goal is let's see the numbers change.
Yeah.
That's going to change the ball flight. Then we need to go on the course and transfer those skills. And it's all about these little steps that they can sort of, every few weeks they can hit a marker which gives them a bit of a confidence boost,
right?
Rather than just focus on the end goal, which might be six months to a year away, and it's hard to get there.
Do you find along that way, like let's use that 18 handicap, right? And moving to a 15, and maybe they move to a 10, like whatever their journey is that, that we're taking as amateurs trying to get better. Do you find maybe you are addressing ball flight at 18, and then do you have to like go back and readdress it in order to get them from a 10 to an 8? Like, is there another point at which like, hey, that ball flight was good enough to get you to here, but now you're saying you want to go here, so now we have to go back and do some more? Like, is it I'm assuming it's not a linear, at least mine has not been linear journey. What do you tend to see, along that pathway for somebody who's, over the course of their life, right? 30, 40, 50, whatever, how many years, trying to continue to play the game and improve?
I think that's a great point, because again, that's something that I will try and speak to my clients about. And it's just about making them have realistic expectations. That I will look at a client, and I'll use my golf swing as an example for this, because I think potentially some golfers get a little surprised. I've got a couple of faults in my swing. And if you said to me, hey, Chris, go and practice for an hour, I'd be working on probably 2 drills that would help my golf swing. Incidentally, they are the 2 drills that I was doing 20 years ago.
Really?
Because my golf swing is never going to be quote unquote fixed.
Right.
I'm always going to have my tendencies, and I'm always going to want to fall into those tendencies. So what I will tell my clients is there's a very good chance that if we pull out the kind of 2 things that are in their swing, potentially 3, that are almost like the big faults, I'll give them some drills to work on those, and those drills should start to see a positive change in their swing. But let's say 6 months' time, they get to a point where we look at it and we go, do you know what, those faults aren't really there anymore. Those drills that they did, you've got to keep doing those.
Yeah.
Those are your drills forever, because those are the drills that will maintain your position. So many golfers make a positive change, look at their swing and go, great, it's fixed. And then 6 months later, they look at a video and go, God, all those faults have come back. Because they're always going to come back. And, it's a case of saying, okay, it's a constant battle to either get your swing to the point where you want it, which many golfers are doing, or to keep it there. And the analogy I always use would be, I mean, we have motorways here. I'm guessing highways more there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if I'm on a big road and there's 5 lanes, and we want the middle lane to be where you're playing your best golf,
Yeah.
my job is to get that golfer into that middle lane.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever lane they're in, turn the wheel, whatever, get in that middle lane. But if I'm in that middle lane and I take my hands off the wheel, 3 miles down the road, I've drifted from that middle lane into a hard shoulder or into the central reservation.
Yeah.
Whereas what you actually do in a car is you constantly hold the wheel and you're making tiny, tiny little adjustments. And they're more just to keep you where you are. That's what your golf swing should be. So you should be doing drills, exercises, practice sessions, which maintain where you are. So you never leave that lane.
Yeah.
What often happens is people drift and drift and drift and drift and drift. 6 months later, it then requires a bigger change to get them kind of back to where they were. It feels strange. It feels different. Whereas one of the phrases I always use is maintenance is easier than the fix.
Unfortunately, this is ringing very, very true for me, Chris. I had so some of the listeners who've been listening. So I've been trying to play competitively for the last couple of years, this is the year 2, I guess. So I finally qualified for the state am. I had gone like 4 or 5 weeks, hadn't shot above a 73. I had historically a very long swing, very steep, left, right. So I get to the state am, and the game, I forgot to pack it in the bag. It didn't show up. But I'd been playing so well. To your point, I was in the middle lane and I just took my hands off. And I was like, hey, I'm just going to play. And I stopped doing those couple basic drills. And I was DFL after round 1. So it was not a good feel. But so I'm in panic mode, right? So I take videos. I send it to my coach here in the States. And he looks at me. He texts me back. He sends me back my first video, from a year and a half ago. He goes, anything look familiar? That was all he said. I was like, 10-4. I should have been doing those couple basic ones. And so go right back to it. And then to me, it's such a weird sport where I should know better. That's the funny part, right? And we see it physically too, where if somebody tends to play, if they're playing a lot, they're on a buddy's trip, or we see it in our tour players or our long drive guys, they all have physical tendencies as well, right? The first thing, their hip gets tight or their trunk gets tight, and I think it rings really true that in the golf swing that we have those tendencies as well. So that's such a cool point and a powerful point that I hope everybody listening, rewind this, or just scan back 2 minutes and re-listen to that, because it literally, I was I thought I was done with the game. I was like, I don't know what the heck's I don't know where the ball's going. And literally, it was the same stuff I had done when I was starting. It was wild.
Yeah, crazy.
It's crazy.
We're all the same. We're all the same.
All the same.
I remember doing this going back a long time now. We did a conference, and there was a golf coach worked with some tour players. He's probably not on the scene anymore. So anyway, he was teaching a tour player, and we had a Q&A afterwards. And one of the people put their hands up and said, "Just curious, how many lessons you've given to that tour player?" Yeah. And he thought for a while. And he said, "Well, how many lessons have I given him?" And bearing in mind he'd been working with him for a good 5-6 years, he said, "How many lessons have I given him?" He said, "I've given him 1 lesson. I just give him that lesson every 3 weeks." I remember sitting there thinking that's so true, because the amount of amateurs come for a lesson and then next week it's, "Oh, what are we doing this week?" We're like, "The same as last week."
That's brilliant. So Chris, the amount of content that you have is unreal. I watched all of your trying to break 30 videos. Those were a lot of fun to watch. But then obviously there's tons of content on your YouTube page. You've got some other exciting stuff coming up that I want to ask you about too. But when people go to Chris Ryan Golf on YouTube, what is the best way for them to interact or get the most out of the page? Obviously, definitely they should subscribe to get updates and those sorts of things. But what's the best way for them to navigate and figure out where they should go for them?
I think that's probably the one flaw in the platform, that you are almost faced with just a barrage of content. And YouTube is, and I guess this works for every industry on YouTube, the algorithm in YouTube follows the viewers.
Yep.
So if the viewers watch a certain type of video, it's going to get promoted more and more and more. So the videos that get promoted and get shown are the videos that people are watching and interacting with.
Yeah.
So the platform is almost saying to the average golfer, we're going to take what you think is correct as being correct.
Yeah.
That's not always the case.
Yeah.
So as a coach, I would potentially look at, a golfer and say, those videos that are getting shown to you actually aren't the best for you. That's where YouTube is potentially flawed. What I would say is that I'm trying to connect with people and build a community rather than just put content out there. So if you're watching anything on YouTube, one of my videos, get in the comments, because I will desperately try to respond to everybody. And I don't try and respond with a yes, thanks, appreciate it. If you ask me a question, I will try and give you the right answer. I might direct you to another video which is more specific. Mm-hmm. The problem is, if I do a video now which is, hey, this secret downswing move will add 40 yards, that will get loads of views.
Great title.
But we both know that's not really going to long-term be the best. So that's where the platform does fall down. But try and interact with me, because that's how you're going to get the most from it.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's funny. We joke, looking at titles and our YouTube page or our podcasts, and it's like, oh, people like the word proven. So it's like, all right, well, what's 3 proven ways to
Exactly.
So that's awesome, Chris, and I think thank you so much for offering that to interact with people, because I think we need more of that in the golf space. I always joke, golf is an interesting sport where there's you can get into the improvement space in so many different. You can go to the store down the street, you can go to the magazine, you go to the website, you go to YouTube, you go to Instagram. Like, there's so many different entry points that I've kind of, I don't know if I'd call it my mission, but really my goal is always, whenever I talk with somebody like yourself and good, like, knowledgeable instructor, because there's a lot of stuff out there that is not very good, but like, to help people understand like how to use the information, because it's definitely a new, and probably the last question I'd love to wrap on is like, what's as the industry has evolved, we now no longer, it used to be like you couldn't get any information unless you went to see Butch Harmon, or unless, right? And now there's information everywhere, and there's too much information. So, I mean, is that kind of what you have seen as it's evolved?
Definitely. I think the information that's out there is becoming a lot better across the board, because there's more good coaches delivering good information, but there's still information out there which is good, but potentially not for the person that's watching it. And I think from my point of view, I will try and put out good content that I believe in, but it's not going to be applicable to everyone.
Right.
The advice that I would try and give to people, if we think about what we spoke about at the start, about how I would analyze someone's golf swing, the viewer on YouTube has got to do a little bit of that. Yeah. So, for example, Chris, if you said to me, jump on YouTube to help my golf game, I'm sort of going, okay, so I know what my tendency is. My tendency is to get a bit hooky, similar to yours. I know that's because my path gets out to the right, my face gets a little open on the way down, and I flip at it, I get a little bit cupped at the top. So if I'm going on YouTube, I'm looking specifically for, okay, how to flatten my wrist out.
This sounds maybe familiar, but that was just a theoretical example.
Exactly. So I would be using YouTube to find drills that help my fault.
Right.
I joke with a couple of friends that we'll all get comments on YouTube videos. We'll put a YouTube video out on a Monday, and then on Tuesday there'll be a comment saying, "I tried this, didn't work." You don't try it. It's like, it's not like, I wouldn't see a video on how to take apart my car engine and just go, I'm going to go try that to see if it,
let's take it apart and see what happens.
Take it apart and see if it works. And so it's like, number one, it's like, well, don't try it. And then number two is, if you do try it, maybe give it more than a day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I posted it 12 hours ago. You couldn't have tried it that well.
Exactly. So I just think, go to YouTube with, first of all, an understanding of what you're looking for, because you'll get to the right videos that way.
Yeah.
And there is great information out there, but not all that information is is going to be suitable for everybody. And I think that's the key on YouTube. It's trying to find out the content, the videos that actually apply to you. And that's kind of, I guess, the difficulty. You know, it's golfers don't know their tendency, they don't know their patterns, they don't know their swing. And so they are out there looking to try that, see if that works. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but you can end up getting all tangled up in your own way, really.
For sure. Yeah. So definitely check out Chris Ryan Golf on YouTube, guys. Go to his playlist. It's all organized there for you. As Chris said, please do some level of assessment of yourself. We always talk about this on the physical side. Assess, don't guess. Same thing applies on the technical side. Now, you also have a website, chrisryangolf.com. I'm looking at it literally right now as we're talking. All these digital courses, like ball striking, short game toolbox. Now, talk to me a little bit about the kind of idea behind those. I'm assuming like just kind of ways to help people little bits in specific areas. What's the best way for people to interact with those courses?
So I created those for a different approach. So let's say somebody's struggling with their chipping, okay, and they hit it a little thin.
Mm-hmm.
Go on YouTube, thin chip shots, there'll be a load of content that comes up.
Yeah.
Okay, and it might be try this, try that. And, something kind of might work. Whereas on my website, I'm almost saying to that golfer, rather than trying to fix that fault that you have, why don't you just learn the correct way to hit all the shots around the green?
Wait, what? Learn the right way to do something, Chris? Have you lost your mind?
Rather than trying to fix it, so every fix is for a specific fault. Whereas that, for example, that short game course is more a case of, right, I'm going to teach you how to hit all these shots.
Right. So
you're not always trying to fix this, fix that, fix this, fix that. You just go, do you know what? I need to learn how to play the short game correctly. And sometimes you don't need to be focusing on what you do wrong. You just need to take a step back and go, well, let's just work on how to do it correctly.
For sure.
And then so they're more kind of in depth. They talk you through things like what is the right setup, when you might change that setup, when you might change the club, how you might change the flight, and actually sort of giving the golfer the tools to become their best golfer. You still have to put the work in, but it's the tools are there.
So there's no magic pixie dust, but if they do the work, they have the right information in there. And I always think, so when the first time I went and saw my coach here, I was a scratch at that point, but I had just kind of figured out, I had never taken a lesson. And he kind of said, so what do you think we need to do? I said, honestly, can you just teach me how to like chip? I would love to just know like how I'm supposed to do it. Cause I just kind of figure it out, but, and it was eye opening. So I think for all of you that are actually looking at trying to get better at the game, these courses, there's tons of them here, guys. Definitely go into that, check it out. I can vouch for Chris. He knows his stuff. I watched more than a few hours, but Chris, obviously you got your YouTube channel, you got chrisryangolf.com, social channels. Where can people find you to follow you and interact with you there?
Yeah, all under my name. So everything's Chris Ryan Golf. So Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter. Don't really do a lot on Twitter though. Not really something I've just taken to really. So yeah, but everything's under my name, Chris Ryan Golf.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, hey, Chris, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. It's been an absolute blast. It's been an honor to have you on. And for everyone listening, please go check this out. I don't bring people on here who are idiots. I only bring people on here who know what they're talking. We vet people. So Chris is one of the good ones, guys. So Chris Ryan Golf, YouTube, check out the website, chrisryangolf.com. Lots of great, tools and basically educational stuff, guys, like actual stuff that will help you if you, now you do have to put in the work, just like the fitness side. You can't look at the weights and hope they get you stronger. You can't look at the lacrosse ball and hope it makes your hip move better. You actually got to do it. But Chris, thanks so much for hanging out with me today, man.
Thanks for the chat. It was really good.
Awesome, guys. We'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, guys.